The Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return.
Hello, and welcome to the Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return. My name is Joni Siegel, and I'm the host for this podcast. My husband, Steve Siegel, is the producer of the podcast. Just a reminder to please subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to podcasts and give us a 5-star rating so that when people search Google for podcasts about addiction, ours will come up and hopefully they will get help. Please also subscribe to our YouTube channel. Give us a thumbs up on our videos and ring the bell so that you will be notified when we have new videos that go up. Today's episode is episode number 296. And today we have an interview with a gentleman named Roger Smith. By the time Roger Smith was a teenager, he was living on the streets of Santa Monica and addicted to drugs. He dropped out of high school, ran into trouble with the law, had his best friend shot right next to him. And at one point, he was so down and out and desperate for a fix in his early 30s that he walked into the Pacific Ocean expecting never to come back. Being an entrepreneur as a young child selling comic books on the streets of New York, he was no stranger to hard work and sales. He ascended the corporate ladder to become the CEO of American Income Life Insurance Company, National Income Life Insurance Company, and Liberty National Life Insurance Company. He's also the recipient of the Yitzhak Rabin Legacy Award, Eleanor Roosevelt Human Rights Award, Healthcare for All Champion Award, Stein Award, as well as numerous other awards and publications. He's the father of 5 adult children, proud grandfather of Maggie May, and currently resides in Florida with his wife Demi and his 2 dogs, Penelope and Chrome. Without further ado, let's talk to Roger Smith. Roger Smith, thank you so much for being willing to share your story with us. I'm looking forward to hearing your story and talking a little bit about your book. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on your show. I appreciate it.
Well, I'm excited to have you. I was reading your bio and it said that you were selling comic books on the streets of New York as a young child. So take me back to your childhood. Let's start at the beginning. Tell me how you grew up.
I was a pretty independent kid. My dad went to jail when I was 3 years old. My mom, single head of household with 3 kids. So I was pretty independent, and I grew up in New York City. My mom had remarried, and back then, if your family went bankrupt on the East Coast, you went as far west as you could go, and ended up going from Manhattan to Malibu. Malibu at that time was all apartment beach shacks. There was a few big homes, but the majority of it were just little apartments and so on. So
I was going to say, I don't know how you could afford to live in Malibu if you were having financial difficulties, because nobody can live there now unless they're bazillionaires.
I lived. There's 13 different apartments that we lived in, and none of them are still there.
Oh, okay. Understood.
Definitely changed, yes.
Okay, but when I loved the idea that you were selling comic books and you were doing that in New York, right? How old were you doing that?
Probably 6 years old. I remember that I was always kind of, hustling for a buck very young. It didn't matter if I, selling comic books or walking dogs or, whatever. I was always looking for a buck. I remember that I would walk at that time we were living on the west side, but I lived on the east side. And I'd be walking across Central Park with my trombone. And of course, at least 3 or 4 times I was mugged for the trombone. The school me the instruments, but it was all, I look back now and go, wow, I would never let my kid do that. But that was the time then.
I was going to say different times.
Yeah.
So how did you get introduced to drugs, Roger?
So it's interesting because up until the age of 14, I think I was like this. I was this pretty good kid. I was the star of the junior high musical, and I was in the woodworking club and the chess club. Got B's and C's, not necessarily A's, but really a pretty good kid. The summer before my 15th birthday, the hippie movement was just starting, and man, I was just looking for my tribe, and there was just a switch that flipped, and I went from that which I just described to a year later being homeless, a drug addict, and a high school dropout. So it was a quick decline. It wasn't like, okay, this took you. It was very quick. It was very quick.
Wow. And so it sounds like, not to evaluate, but it sounds like you felt more at home with that group than you had prior. Because you said when you found your tribe, there you were.
Yeah.
Interesting. Did your mom know?
Yeah. My mom knew, but by that point, I was uncontrollable. I couldn't. My mom even had my biological father come out and try to talk to me, and talk to me about you getting in trouble and so on. And I didn't have any type of relationship with him, but he said to me, he says, your sister and your brother, they're made for college. Maybe you should just like go into a trade school. And it's amazing how I had no relationship with this guy. There's no reason why that should have been an influence, but it was. It was.
And how would he know? He hadn't even lived with you.
I agree. But for some reason, I did let him influence me. And thus the title of the book, The Most Unlikely Leader, An Unbelievable Journey from GED to CEO, because I never went to college.
Right. What drugs were you doing, Roger?
I started off on it was like a solvent. It was called toluene, and they actually used it to clean the barnacles off of boats.
Yes.
And started off with that. We had a friend that was working on the dock of a hospital, and was stealing like vials of morphine. Uh-huh. So we very quickly went from that into morphine, then into heroin, downers, all of that stuff.
Right. And so at that point you were homeless, did you say?
Yeah. So at that point I was kind of on the streets. Yeah.
Okay. And what happened then? Because I think you had kind of a traumatic thing happen during these years.
So, listen, there's a lot of times where I should have hit bottom. I can't, I don't know why I didn't, but I didn't. And at one point it was me and my friend, and we're walking down, we're in front of a pawn shop, and he actually grabs a trash can, breaks the window, grabs a watch or something, and we start running down the street. And we didn't know that the pawn shop owner was actually in the shop, and he came out, and we're running, and he shot my friend dead, and wow. Kept running. And
but that wasn't rock bottom, right?
No, in fact, I was a functioning addict. I was a functioning addict for 20 years.
Wow.
So, unfortunately, I was pretty good at achieving success and still able to keep my addiction going.
So why get clean and sober? I get it. I mean, if you can function with it and still be successful, it's like, why bother? So at what point did you have that kind of moment where you said, okay, I need to get clean and sober? When did that happen?
Well, first of all, none of it was sustainable.
Okay.
So I would have success, I would self-destruct. I would have success, I would rebuild, self-destruct. It was that type of cycle.
Yeah.
But there was a point where I'm in a little cottage in Malibu, and I'm on all fours, and I'm looking through the carpet for a sliver of crack cocaine that I may have dropped. And it wasn't for moments. I mean, I'm talking about for hours. And finally I just thought, man, this is, I don't want to live if this is what life's about. My picture of myself, that deep picture that's inside that nobody else could see, homeless, a drug addict, old. And I decided right then I'd just walk downstairs and walk into the ocean. Thankfully, I didn't, and I ended up going into rehab the next day. And back then, it wasn't like it is today. It wasn't easy finding rehabs.
Mm-hmm.
Few and far between, and I ended taking a plane, then a bus into Northern California, and attended a rehab there.
Okay, so how old were you when you finally did this? When you finally got into rehab?
35.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, you part of your career is you were a very successful CEO of huge companies. Was this after that?
It was after it.
Okay. So sorry, I was just going to say, so you went to rehab. Did you stay clean and sober at that point?
Yeah.
Okay.
I kept that picture of who I was at the very last forefront in my mind. It's still forefront in my mind.
Mm.
I never wanted to go back there. I never wanted to be that person again.
Right.
It's interesting that as an addict, we spend so much energy taking care of our addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get clean, you still have the same energy. It's just now you can devote that into something that's positive and productive instead of devoting it into something that's negative.
It's interesting that you say that, because I know we've had people talk on the podcast about how you need to approach your sobriety and your recovery with the same intention and chutzpah and, courage and strength, what have you, that you approached your addiction. Like that amount of energy, you need to then put it into fixing your life and not destroying your life.
Yeah, I agree. It was funny because when I got out of rehab, I figured I had 20 years of addictive habits there. And so like the first thing I did is whatever I was doing, I was going to do. So if I put on my right shoe first, I was going to put on my left shoe first. If I was going to do the left, whatever I had been doing, I really needed to do the opposite, because whatever I was doing before was a part of my addiction. So change, and I did.
Yep. I think that's a good philosophy. I like that philosophy. Like however you approach life as an addict, approach it the opposite as someone in recovery or a sober person, and there you go. I think that's huge. I mean, I think that's a good message. So, okay, but you're retired now, right? You went up and you became heads of all these big companies.
Yep.
And when did you write this book?
So I wrote it I started it about 4 years ago.
Okay.
I published it at the end of May.
Okay. And does the book talk about your life as an addict? Does it talk about that part of your life?
It does. It was, I just wanted to be kind of brutally honest about where I came from and what my story was. So, it's a memoir. It also talks about my successes and my failures in business, but it talks about it's funny you asked that question, because if you write like a fiction book and somebody says, if you ask them, hey, did you like the book? And they go, not really. Well, you may be disappointed, but it's not the end of the world. When you write a story about your life and you ask somebody, did you like the book? And they go, not really. You go, wait, that's my life? Oh, right. Man, so it really puts you in a very vulnerable position, but it's a position that I think I needed to get to because there's a lot of people that are stuck in their life. There's a lot of people that even though they're sober, they just think at this point, the deck is stacked against them. They got so many things that happened in their past that they're not going to be able to overcome it and have a successful future.
You are listening to the Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return. For more information on the podcast or to reach out if you have a story you would like to share with us, go to our Facebook page by the same name, or you can email us at theaddictionpodcast@yahoo.com, or go to our website, theaddictionpodcast.com, or call us at 727-314-7080. And please remember to subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen to podcasts and give us a 5-star review. Sometimes, the hardest thing about getting someone into recovery is getting them to agree to treatment. Bobby Newman, a certified drug counselor with 30 years experience and an over 85% success rate as an interventionist, has created a series of 12 videos that you can use right now to learn every step to get your loved one to agree to treatment. Call 866-989-4499 today and say the word podcast to get a 10% discount. Or go to newmaninterventions.com and type in the word podcast for a 10% discount. This service comes with a free 1-hour consultation with Bobby.
And, the purpose of me writing that was to show, well, no, that's not necessarily the case. You can have all these things against you and still be prosperous, still, be successful. It's just harder.
I think that's huge. What you said that one of the successful actions that you had was, if you put on the right shoe when you were an addict, you put on the left shoe first, when you were clean. What were some other philosophies that you used to get to where you were? I mean, you were the CEO of major life insurance companies. Yeah. People who aren't recovered, don't make it there. So what were some of the successful things that you would share?
That's so there's a couple of them. I mean, one is that I was not naturally good at any of these things. It's not like I was a natural born salesperson or a natural born leader or a natural born CEO. Okay. So in fact, it's quite the opposite. I just had to work harder than most people to be able to achieve some of these things. But how you're told, or you said it yourself, don't burn your bridges. And I subscribe to a philosophy that says burn every damn one of them. And I don't.
Okay, what do you mean by that? I mean, give me an example there, Roger. I'm having trouble with that one.
I don't mean relationships, unless you want to burn it. What I mean is that many of us, we have in the back of our mind a plan B or an escape hatch. We say to ourselves, well, if this doesn't work, I'll do this.
Right.
It's amazing at how many people give up on their dreams when they hit this obstacle that seems so insurmountable. And in my mind, I'm sitting there going, you know what? I'm burning that bridge behind me. There's no way I'm going backwards. The only way I'm going is forward. And if it's burned behind me, I don't have that temptation. I can only move forward. And it is amazing how creative you get with perseverance, when you hit that wall, to go around it, go over it, go through it. But it's amazing how you get over on the other side. And then years later, you look back and go, okay, well, that was a bump in the road, right?
Yep.
All it was a bump in the road, because you're still going to have more of those walls and obstacles in front of you.
That's fascinating that you put it that way, Roger, because also if you look at it, so I'm a drug addict and I have to get my next fix, and I'm going to do all sorts of things to make sure that I get that fix. And just like I said before, and I know I'm repeating myself, if I then approach my recovery and approach my sobriety and approach life after drugs or alcohol with that viewpoint, I think anybody listening could definitely be successful, in recovery.
Yeah, somebody had said that to me at one time when I was on a podcast, and they said, do you think that being an addict contributed to you being successful? Some of the things, and I sat there and I was kind of like shocked by the question.
Yep.
Up until that point, I would have said no. And then I thought about it. I said, yeah, there are many things that I did as an addict that once in a productive, positive way, reaped so many benefits. So, I do agree with you now. I think that's right. Yeah.
Yep. And the only other thing I would disagree with one thing you said, and that you said you weren't good at sales, but if you were on the street selling comic books at 6 years old, I beg to differ with you. I am fairly certain you sold some of those comic books. So you might have had a little bit of an ability to sell, Roger.
Yeah, I might have. But let me tell you something. When I started selling, you know how like they say when you are in a sales thing, when you close, you say your closing line and then you shut up. And then the first person who talks is the one that's buying, right? I would shut up and then the back of my neck would start to shake so bad that I literally thought that people thought I was having a seizure. I mean, I was so scared. I was so fearful of the close. So, as I said before,
that's hilarious.
Well, guess what? Just work harder at it, practice it more, do the things that you got to do to become good at it. So,
Yep. And I am assuming that when you took over some of these insurance companies as CEO, that you made them bigger.
I did.
More successful. Yep.
So, when I took over American Income Life, it was writing about 48 million. And when I retired, we were right at 250 million.
Oh, my goodness.
Sales force from 1,100 salespeople to almost 8,000 salespeople.
Wow.
Yeah. I was fortunate. I think I was blessed. But I was able to grow. I was able to grow companies because, I understood what I believe are the 4 characteristics of a leader. And because of that, I was able to grow.
What are those? Just out of curiosity, the 4 characteristics.
Quickly, I think leaders are visionary. They can see further than the people that they're leading. I always say, listen, if you're a leader and you're not spending an hour of your day daydreaming, you're not doing your job. So you got to be able to see further. You have to have influence, and you get influence 2 ways. One is by getting results. People, you're not going to follow me if what I'm showing you is failure. So you're going to follow me if I'm showing you how to succeed.
Right.
The other part of that is that you have to know that I care about you, and not that I care about you because it looks good for me.
Right.
But I care about you, your family, your success. And if you have both of those ingredients going, then you have influence, and then people will follow you. And then 3rd and 4th was you got to have strong systems. You can't have it where all of a sudden you're out of the picture and everything's falling down.
Right.
And the follow-up to that is don't have a system unless you're willing to inspect it. People saying to you, well, you don't trust me. No, that has nothing to do with it. What has to do with it is I've got a system and I want to make sure that it's going right because I know if we follow the system that there's going to be success. And I think if you have those 4 characteristics, then you got a good chance of leading people and having them have success.
I think that's huge. I think you have so much good advice to share with people. Roger, tell us the name of your book. And when I make the video, I'll put up a cover. I can see it right behind you.
Yeah, it's called The Most Unlikely Leader, An Unbelievable Journey from GED to CEO.
That's huge. And then, and by the way, before I forget, very well done on your sobriety, because it's been how many years now?
It's 35 years.
Well done. I mean, very well done. I have not experienced it, but I know that it isn't necessarily an easy thing. And so you are quite the success story. And you just started a podcast, did you say?
No.
Oh, you've just been on podcasts. I thought you were talking that you had your own podcast. Fair enough. Well, Roger, thank you for taking the time to talk to us today. Best of luck with your book. It is available on Amazon for our listeners. And it's called The Most Unlikely Leader by Roger Smith. And I will put up the picture and a link so that you can find it. And Roger, thank you. I just really appreciate you sharing your story.
Thank you so much. They can also go onto my website, rogersmith.me, and it has my bio and my social links, and they can order it from there also.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed the interview today with Roger Smith. I will put up a picture of his book, and I will, it'll say on there the title, and you can get it on Amazon. And I just love his approach to life. I mean, there is someone who, really took a very energetic and entrepreneurial approach to life. And even though he became an addict, and even though he was a functioning addict, because I think sometimes people who are functioning addicts, I mean, the viewpoint can be, why get clean and sober? I'm living my best life. But he did get clean and sober, and he approached his recovery and sobriety with the same energy and élan vital, if you will, that he had approaching his addiction. And he's been super successful. As I said in the bio, he's been CEO of 3 different huge insurance companies. So he is definitely a successful guy and has words of wisdom. You all have a great week. We are right in the midst of the holidays. Way back when we started this podcast, Jason, my co-host, and I used to talk about how even though the holidays are the absolute worst time to have addicts in your area or to be addicted, a lot of times people think they want to wait until New Year's to get their loved one into treatment, or they think that they don't want to get themselves into treatment until the New Year's. It's not a good decision. If you're addicted, get help right now. And if you have a loved one who's addicted, get them into treatment right now. We'll talk to you again next week with another interview.
You have been listening to the Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return. For more information, reach out to us on Facebook or go to www.theaddictionpodcast.com. Our email is theaddictionpodcast@yahoo.com.